I completely transformed our bathroom, and I did this without tearing everything down to the studs. Instead, I built this, a simple but nice cabinet with a door. And it is the key factor that changed the look and feel of this bathroom. In addition to that cabinet, we added a couple smaller pieces here and there. Et voila! This bathroom not only does look way nicer now, it's also much more organized and overall a nicer place to be in. I mean, who doesn't like to do their business in a nice, cozy place? Okay, enough of the shenanigans. Let's show you how I built this cabinet and also what else we did to make this bathroom nicer. I'm using 50mm birch plywood for all parts of the cabinet, even though 80mm would be better. But I had a full 50mm thick sheet left over from previous projects, so I used that. Okay, the big sheet of plywood is broken down into more manageable pieces. One of the pieces is this panel here. This is going to be the left and right side of my cabinet. I want to have a middle shelf in this cabinet, which is going to be sitting in some grooves. And these grooves, I'm going to cut them now with my router here and have them perfectly aligned. Because after I'm cutting the grooves, then I'm cutting both sides out, so the groove will be perfectly aligned. I set the height of the bit to be half the thickness of the board, which sometimes is a bit fiddly with my router. Then I used the track of my track saw as a straight edge. The diameter of the bit I'm using here is smaller than the thickness of the board, so I had to move the straight edge a little bit over and make a second pass. With the groove finished, I could cut down the board into two individual sides with my table saw. Okay, next step is the top, bottom and middle shelf. And as I don't have a good miter gauge or crosscut sled or so on, I'm going to do it a bit differently. I'm going to roughly crosscut them with the track saw and this 90-degree bracket here, which is pretty accurate, but the top and bottom need to be absolutely the same width. So I'm going to finish off the parts on the table saw and yeah, go on with that. I wanted to use rabbets for the top and bottom, so after the boards were cut to the right width, I used the table saw to cut the rabbets. I thought about using the router, but decided against it as I prefer the table saw to cut rabbets. To cut them, I first made a small groove with the board lying flat on the table saw. Then I bust out the tenon jig to hold the board vertically, set fence and blade height so that the cuts intersect, and cut out all 4 rabbets. I sanded the inside faces and was so eager to glue everything together that I completely forgot to drill the holes for the adjustable shelf and hinges, which will bite me a bit later, but we'll get to it. To hold all 4 sides in place, I like to use these corner clamps. And to add enough pressure, I use 2 band clamps. While the glue was drying, I cut out the middle shelf, and much to my surprise, it was a perfect fit right away. Future Philip here. It might sound like a good thing that I got a perfect fit on the first try, but it also means that I was just a fraction away from cutting the shelf too small. That's why I normally prefer to sneak up on the fit. But everything went alright and yeah, got a good fit. So, on with the video. I glued in the shelf and clamped everything together. It starts to look like a cabinet, so I'm happy. Next task was to build the door, and as I wanted to have a window in it, the first step was to cut some grooves in the side pieces. I did that on the table saw and slowly sneaked up on the right fit for the acrylic I wanted to use. I flipped the side pieces for each pass to make sure the groove will end up in the middle. After the grooves were cut, I used my miter sled to cut all the side pieces to length. I loved this sled, as it not only makes cutting perfect 45-degree corners easy, but also getting all sides to the same length. Okay, so the next step is the door, and I did use some miters here in the corners, so it looks kind of nice. I reinforced them with some biscuits, some size 0 biscuits here, and into this groove here comes this acrylic glass, so that you can see inside of the cabinet. And the next step is to glue the whole door and then sand it and attach the hinges. Yeah, so let's do it. Zack, zack, zack. As I've made a good amount of picture frames in the past, gluing up the door went very smooth, as it's basically the same thing. I used the band clamps again, as they are perfect for clamping mitered corners. Now to the part where I fixed past Philip's eagerness. To drill the holes for the shelf pins and the door hinges, I used this really simple but great jig to get the right hole spacing. And as you might see, my drill fits barely in there. I had to push the bit all the way into the chuck to make it fit. But as a result, the holes weren't deep enough, so I had to take a second round, which luckily went relatively quick, thanks to the fact that I used the spill stop. Next up was drilling the holes for the hinges into the door. I needed the middle point between two mounting holes, so I got this bloom jig which plugs into the existing holes for the adjustable shelf and let you mark the middle point of these two holes. I transferred these over to the door, where I can use these markings for yet another jig. This time for drilling out the mounting holes for the door part of the hinges, and luckily there were no further hiccups as the hinges fit perfectly. I screwed the mounting brackets to the cabinet and finally could test out the door. To keep the cabinet square and prevent stuff from being pushed out the back, I added a back panel made out of 6mm birch plywood. And my favorite way to get a perfect fit is to cut the back panel a little bit oversized, screw it to the cabinet and then use a flush trim bit in my router to cut off the overhang. I sanded everything to 240 grit and applied the finish. I used a water-based varnish this time, and with that, the bathroom cabinet is finished. So, the cabinet is finished. We can now turn our attention to some of the smaller projects, and even though they are smaller, they are not less important. I mean, oftentimes it helps to clean up a space and replace ugly or impractical pieces with nice ones that actually work. Like these tower racks, these ones, that replaced an ugly screw in the wall. Or the shelf that I cut from some scraps and mounted to the wall with some brackets that are painted black. Or these hooks I mounted on the side of the cabinet to hang different things that otherwise didn't have a place. Or this nice shower curtain here that replaced the ugly, worn down one. And something like a plant always goes a long way, so we added one. Et voila! Our bathroom not only does look way nicer now, it's also much more organized and overall a nicer place to be in. Okay, as you saw, you don't need to tear down your bathroom to make it nicer, cozier and more organized. Especially when you have a smaller bathroom, a good and organized cabinet will go a long way. So if you want to build this one yourself, look into the description. I have links in there not only for the cabinet itself, but also for all of the parts I 3D printed. So you can print them yourself. All that's left to say is, thank you guys for watching and see you in the next one. I completely transformed our bathroom. Ich sollte vielleicht nicht die Jesus-Pose hier machen. Scheiße. Sekunde. So. I completely transformed our bathroom. Ich mache immer noch diese Jesus-Pose. So, we added one.